honor to be here the same night, especially to share this night with Kent and Denny. I've known Kent since he was in the DA's office many, many years ago, and Kent has always had this enthusiasm and upbeat way. And probably what some of you don't realize that this is something that's been around a long time, because I was talking with Heather, who is our law school dean, a very able law school dean, and she confided in me that as we were walking down the hallway that her and Kent were high school cheerleaders together. It's had a long time.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Kent is a dear friend, and I'm really honored to be part of the night where you got this award, Kent. It's very deserving. We all know all you've done and all you've given to the court. We deeply appreciate it. We're lucky to have you. Lucky to have you. So now I get to turn to Barry Klopfer. I am kind of surprised that Barry would invite me to do this for him. Although I did meet Barry several years ago, 33 to be a matter of fact. I guess when I first met him, I just didn't have that much of an impression on him. Most of you know I'm kind of soft-spoken. I don't speak out loud. I don't have a voice that carries very well. And Barry has this good baritone voice. Well, I was sworn in and told to go to Oxnard to meet the misdemeanor supervisor. Well, I went over there. He didn't know who I was. And maybe I didn't speak up loud enough or talk to him loud enough because for 14 years he didn't know who I was. You say, oh, how could that be? How could Barry invite me to be up here? He didn't know who I was for 14 years. Well, I have it on videotape. So back in 1990, when Becky and I decided to be married, Barry was Becky's choice to marry us. I mean, he didn't know me very well, so Becky decided she worked with Barry in the Consumer Fraud Unit, the DA's office. And, so Barry was her choice. And at that time, she was known by Becky Dean. And so we decided to do a small little wedding at the courthouse. My mom was there. Also was Becky's parents were there. So we were all kind of standing up there. We're getting married. We go through the ceremony, and we're all done. And Barry turns to my mom, turns to Becky's parents, and says, I give you Mr. and Mrs. Dean. Okay. You know, I think really what he was telling me, though, is that Becky was going to be the boss. I better learn that. The word character today has kind of a different connotation. Any of you that watch the USA Network, they really advertise their shows. They advertise characters welcome. They refer to their shows Monk and House, and anybody that's watched it, you can't say characters welcome. So it's kind of taken on a different connotation. Maybe the connotation that Brian and I would do today, you know, not something. But many years ago, back when Barry and I were very young, Reader's Digest used to come up with an article every month called My Most Unforgettable Character. And back then, it really meant someone who, by their self-sacrifice, their encouragement, meant something to somebody so specially that that person wrote in and kind of had a first-person article about that. Well, I can honestly say that within a year of working with Barry, I wanted to write my own article for Reader's Digest. Now, I never did. Well, one reason I knew it embarrassing, but another reason is it wasn't because I didn't have the time, it wasn't because I didn't want to, it's because every chapter with Barry unfolded a new horizon, a new way. I found out something different about Barry. Barry's the kind of person that, for me, became a friend that was without equal by the way he lived his life and the courage he had in his life and the disabilities that he overcame, and it changed my life. It changed the way I looked at things. He is a friend. He's a friendship without obligation. You could call Barry at any time, anywhere, and he'd come help you, no matter what else he was doing or what he had to set aside. He's the kind of friend that gave you warmth when some of the darkest nights of your lives, when things weren't going well. And another thing about Barry is that although he has done so much, both as a deputy district attorney and as a judge, and some of the things that I'll mention in just a minute that I think he's accomplished so greatly on the court. But he's done this in spite of his disabilities. But the amazing thing to me about Barry is not that he's done this in spite of his disabilities, but if you spend 10 minutes with him, you forget that he's disabled. You look and you say, you just forget it completely. Now, this is something I'm very proud of Barry about, but it's also worked against him a couple of times here. He used to have a neighbor that had great Dodger seats that he got from his company, and so one day Barry said, got these field seats, so he invited Steve Hintz, myself, and his son, and we all drove down to Dodger Stadium. I hadn't been up here that long, and I was a big Dodger fan, and so I said, hey, I know the stadium. I've got it down pat, Barry. I got this preferred parking. I'll get us in. I'll show you where to park. Our seats will be right there. Well, that was right. You know, we had good field seats. I parked us in the right field when the seats were in the left field. So I paraded Barry all the way across the stadium. I wanted to hide the restroom the rest of the game, but Barry, being the guy that he is, he never complained. Back when he was in the district attorney's office, he and now Judge Hoyt, really created the consumer fraud unit as it's known today, and its effectiveness today. Now, there was a consumer fraud unit before Barry and Toy took over and created it and made it what it was, but it was one of those things that they had a DA investigator, and he took down a list of all the contacts and all the people he helped, except if you called in and it was the wrong number, got a check. If you called in one direction from somewhere else, you got a check. So they had a lot of contacts and no action. But when Barry and Toy got there, they set the world on fire, and that's the way it stayed until Barry became a judge. When you get the call from the governor's office and you say, "Oh, you're going to be a judge," I think you've seen it through Kent tonight and through all of us. It feels so lucky to have the job. I mean, it's sometimes you just feel that the stars were right, the moon was aligned, or something. And there you are. You have the job. You knew there were a lot of other people out there that were just as qualified, but all of a sudden you have the job, and you're so excited. It's a big rush. And then you get to working with the local law, and you realize, this is a job too. And but when I was at Barry in the DA's office, we were very close. He was my mentor. We shared supervisory assignments. If there's anything I needed to know or run past something, it was Barry. But when he became a judge, the relationship, we still went to lunch, but it changes because we have to maintain that distance, and we cannot talk about our cases with other people. The only people we can talk about are other judges, and so all of a sudden I was cut off. Although we were still friends, we still did things together, it wasn't quite the same. Well, after I've been a judge a couple of years, I realized that, sure, I like this job, I feel very lucky about having it, but one of the great benefits of it is I've been able to share this and share it with Barry as a friend and also a colleague that we've, if I had to say, what did I really like about the 20 years on the bench? Number one was I was able to continue and share that intimate friendship with Barry on a daily basis. And that meant more to me than the call after a while.